In 1958, a company known as Monroe Industries began funding a research project where they were studying accelerated learning through practical environmental changes. Well, as a result of their findings, in 1971, the research project actually expanded, and what's now known as the Monroe Institute was founded. Now, what exactly is accelerated learning through practical environmental changes? Well, essentially what the Monroe Institute is doing is they are studying and developing psychic type abilities. Now, a lot of you probably think, oh, this is kind of out there. Well, you might want to know that the Central Intelligence Agency has actually funded and invested a very significant amount of money into the Monroe Institute to develop remote viewers. Now, here today on Shawn Ryan Show, I have an ambassador of the Monroe Institute. He's a good friend of mine. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't yet, please head over to Apple and Spotify. Leave us a review. Tell us how we're doing. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Many of you already know this. We have a ton of raw reels. We see you guys taking our content, repurposing it. Made it easy for you. There's a link below in the description. It's got tons of raw reels for you. You can download them for free, do whatever you want with them, monetize them, make money. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome my good friend, Shawn Webb, to the Shawn Ryan Show. Cheers. Shawn, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, sir. Good to be back.
So we did a previous episode talking about the dangers of AI and how it's going to manipulate the entire population, how to combat it, which was fascinating. We're recording a second episode just a couple hours after that. So anybody who has not seen that, I highly encourage you to go back and watch the previous episode with Shawn. It is some of the most intriguing content that we've ever recorded here. And so today, so you're no stranger to the show, so today we're going to get into the Monroe Institute and remote viewing, how you got involved in that, what's the Monroe Institute, talk about, some of the stuff that CIA and the Monroe Institute have collaborated on, and when it comes to remote viewing, and we'll get into it.
Nice.
But I am super pumped about this episode as well. We took a long lunch to reset our brains from the previous one. We're recording two in one day, but because it's a separate episode, everybody always gets a gift, no matter how many times you come on the show. You got any ideas?
I don't know. Let me guess.
Come on. Come on.
Thank you, sir. Nice.
Yeah.
Vigilance Elite gummy bears.
I feel like I just gave you the exact same bag with the exact same Vigilance Elite gummy bears.
Thank you for regifting it.
About 4 hours ago. So
Back to me.
So yeah.
I'm going to eat them. I'm going to share them with my son.
You should.
Yeah.
You should. I'll give you some extra ones.
Nice.
Since we're doing
Appreciate it.
2 episodes. But anyways, digging into, I've been very interested in the topic of remote viewing and the Monroe Institute. I found out about the Monroe Institute several years ago, just kind of digging around at some stuff and in remote viewing, seen some things. I won't go into it, but I've seen some things. Let's just say I've seen some things overseas. I've seen some people brought in, and or let me rephrase that. I haven't seen these things. I know people who I've worked with who have seen these.
Where they've used remote viewing for
Yes,
operations, yeah.
and
It's effective.
it ever since that got put in my ear, I have just been intrigued by it, and been wanting to dive in, and I haven't it's the Monroe Institute has been a topic on. I have a sheet that of different topics that I'm very interested in that I want to interview people about, and on the same sheet is a list of names. It's like a dream list of who I want to interview.
Yeah.
Monroe Institute and remote viewing has been on there. It was one of the first things I put on the list, and then we had a conversation, and about somebody else, who you were prompting me to kind of get on the show, and I hope that happens. And then we got into a detailed conversation, and I was like, hey, you got to get in here. We got to do this. We got to do this.
Yeah.
And so thank you for coming, man.
Thanks for having me back, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's I know this one's just going to be just as.
I love this topic.
Me too. So let's just get right into it. What is the Monroe Institute?
So the Monroe Institute is one of the, if not the premier research institutes for consciousness expansion. And on the East Coast, at least, if not in the country. Now, that begs the question, okay, so what is consciousness? And consciousness is that place within us that we observe from. It's a separate space from our minds because, like if we talked about the last episode, we talked about one characteristic, one phenomenon of consciousness versus our mind's knowledge. If we can take our consciousness and see what our mind is doing with our emotions and stuff like that, see our mind in operation, that proves that consciousness is separate from our mind. And so we're not exactly sure. We don't have a complete definition of what consciousness is. No one agrees on the definition of consciousness. There are a lot of scientists out there that say consciousness is an emergent property of the complex system of our brains, and if our brains weren't there, we wouldn't have consciousness. And while that's true to a point, it doesn't necessarily say that consciousness is just in our brains. And I feel that the evidence that science is putting forward is that consciousness is actually out beyond our bodies as well as something that we experience through our bodies. But when you reach out of your body into consciousness, you can do things like remote viewing and to see into the future, to discern information, which, by the way, comes from a study that was done 90 times in 33 different independent labs in 14 different countries that showed human beings can literally look into the future regarding a task that they're doing now. Well, expansion out into that consciousness is that practice of taking your mind and going out beyond your body to find out the cool things that you can do with it and the cool things that you can experience with it and the new things that you can learn and the ways that you can use it for things like remote viewing. And so Monroe is that place that helps develop technology to help humans expand that consciousness out beyond their body and do really cool things with it. So they have, they invented this HemiSync technology that everybody's talking about. They're the place that the CIA had that report out on the internet that was, popular on social media just recently of, the gateway tapes and the gateway protocol. They invented that, and that's what the government was using and experimenting with and researching regarding expansion of consciousness, using the human's innate ability to reach out beyond the body into consciousness to do cool stuff. That's what Monroe is.
Are they just into, I shouldn't say just, but is the focus remote viewing, or is there other aspects of consciousness that they're researching as well?
There are other aspects. They're number one in remote viewing because of their history of helping to develop a training program for the CIA and military industrial remote viewers that they developed the program for. They trained the people in the government who were remote viewers for a number of years before they actually had their own program set up internally. So that's kind of their pedigree and their history, is being the top place that trained all the remote viewers and put together a training program that allowed for people to do that kind of cool stuff. But then they branched out into other stuff, like Bob Monroe, who started the Monroe Institute, who's no longer with us. He was interested in all kinds of cool stuff and the utilization of technology to expand consciousnesses in multiple places. So now they got courses on how to reach out and communicate with extraterrestrial entities, like, some crazy fringe stuff, but they also have other stuff like how to train yourself for potentially having out-of-body experiences and extending your consciousness out to go see things, not in a remote viewing fashion, but to go see other places and other things that aren't local to your body consciousness. And they've got all kinds of stuff, and they do some, it's almost like a philanthropy or an outreach to spirits. One of their programs reaches out to lost souls that haven't found their way to their final destination after their death. They're confused about, where they are and what happened, and yada, yada, yada. They lost their life suddenly, and they're just wandering around. And they have a program that's designed to help go out and reach those folks and lead them into a place where they can, finally get to their final destination. It's like, and there's science up there that helps validate a lot of what they're doing in the physical realm, to say there's evidence that proves that this stuff is effective. There's evidence, and like in the case of Joe McMoneagle, who was remote viewer number 1 for the Army intelligence and CIA program that they put together, his evidence is irrefutable. Like, that's on government record that he did all this stuff and was able to go to other places from his living room in Virginia and then out an entire nuclear sub-program for the Russian military, where he was the only one in the room who drew the sub with all these characteristics, and then it proved to be completely accurate. And he drew it from his living room in Virginia.
That is the most remarkable. When we spoke on the phone,
yeah,
and you told me about that, that is the most remarkable remote viewing piece of information I've ever heard.
That's not even his best one, but it's pretty impressive. You want me to tell the story?
Not yet. We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. I want to stick with the Monroe Institute, Bob Monroe.
Yeah.
And how long has the Monroe Institute been around?
Since the 60s, I believe.
Since the 60s?
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in what you know. So the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, and the Monroe Institute collaborated. A substantial amount of money was poured into the Monroe Institute to research. Is it research and develop, or did it start with research with remote viewing?
Well, the story that I got on the origin of Monroe Institute was that Bob Monroe was just simply interested in trying to figure out what technologies could assist with consciousness expansion. And he put together some programs, and all they had were gateway experiences back in the day. And
what is a gateway experience?
So the gateway is Bob's method of introducing binaural frequencies to where, for instance, you have 100 hertz in one ear and 104 hertz in the other ear. You can hear them both, but you can't hear 4 hertz. Normally it's below our audible level. But if you put two signals in your ears, right and left, that have a difference of 4 hertz, your brain then starts activating in a way to try to resolve that, and it turns on things because that's specifically right in the delta and theta transition area, and it can turn on experiences in your mind that would not normally be turned on in your consciousness. And so it gives you different experiences of consciousness. And so he started to experiment with that kind of technology, and that program, the Gateway, was introducing people into different levels of consciousness where you could experience deeper levels of concentration aided by the technology that they were putting in headphones, right? And so there's this guy, Skip, who was instructed to put together the remote viewing program for the military and CIA because they were getting reports that Russia was doing the same thing, that they were using psychics to look inside the secrets of the United States. So they needed to do an analysis of what kind of risk they were talking about and whether the United States should also investigate that type of technology.
Russia's doing this too.
Yeah, Russia was doing it at the time, and we were getting reports about it.
So they were ahead of us on this.
Yeah.
Is anybody else doing this that you're aware of?
From what I understand, although no one would admit it, every major country in the United States is implementing this type of program. Or excuse me, every major country in the world is implementing this. Like every first world nation is implementing this in their intelligence communities.
Wow.
Yeah, but no one wants to talk about it because, first of all, it's woo-woo crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. And second, you don't want to identify your best viewers because for instance, like Joe was attempted assassinated 3 times.
Hey, you know what? People listening right now that think this is woo-woo, do a Google search, do a DuckDuckGo search, do a whatever the hell you want search, and just Google Monroe Institute, CIA, and the shit's going to come up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there you go. For all of you people that still believe in, that that you got to hear it from a government source.
Yeah.
Which I can't believe, whatever. But there it is. It's right there.
Yeah, I mean, they invested millions of dollars in Monroe. Skip, their old program director for remote viewing, came down and was just researching, trying to figure out what a training program might look like for a remote viewer. How do you expand somebody's consciousness, or how do you increase their level of psychic abilities? And this is crazy stuff that they were investigating back then, but they wanted to make sure they weren't investing money in a bad way, or they weren't wasting it on charlatans, that type of thing. So he would go out to these places and investigate them. And Bob basically took him around, gave him a tour, but put him in a radio-shielded room with a pair of headphones on, started playing some tones in his ears, and Skip started floating up out of his body. So he thought that was pretty interesting. And so he put Monroe on a short list of places to investigate after he identified some folks who could possibly be good remote viewers. And so then he devised the idea that he said, okay, so we're looking for folks in the intelligence community. How do we find, who might be the psychics? And he looked for folks who were in their jobs longer than they should be. Because he thought, just as a common sense perspective, if these people are tuned into something extra, it's going to be the folks who are surviving longer in a shorter life expectancy job because they're making the right choices at the right times to stay alive. And it just so happened that Joe McMoneagle, who was remote viewer number 1, he had spent 14 years in the field as an operative. And he was in a job that the life expectancy was 20 months, and he had spent 14 years in that job. So they yanked him in and started interrogating him to ask him to, see if he was a double agent and was getting fed information on the other side. And when they figured out he wasn't, they sent him to Stanford Research Institute for testing, where Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, which I'm sure those names will ring some bells for folks who are interested in extraterrestrial stuff, because Hal's at the top of that chain as well. Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ were developing a program to try to test remote viewers, and they sent Joe McMoneagle out there, and he tested off the charts. He nailed every one of their tests except for one, and he got a second-place result on the last one.
What are some of these tests?
So basically the tests were, we have a target, you don't know who it is, and that target, through a double-blind process, has been instructed to go to a location. The target doesn't know where the target's a person. The target doesn't know where the location is until they're handed the envelope, tell them to go there. The targets have been randomized and put in envelopes, and then a dice gets rolled for a randomization to select where they're going. And the two people are never in the same room. They don't know each other. The remote viewer goes in a radio-shielded room that's separated in a different building, and the target, randomized location, they get the envelope, they open it up, they go there. And so then it's the job of the remote viewer to say, okay, your target is at a location. Tell us about the location. And that's it. That's all they get. So then the remote viewer goes into a little bit of a meditation to clear their mind. And Joe's explanation of remote viewing is like, you imagine a cardboard door in front of you, and you poke a hole in it. And you don't see the whole picture, but you start to see a little bit of it. And you get the little pieces of information about things. And he started drawing what he saw on the target location. And he would nail, and now here's the process of how a separate viewing gets viewed. It's a separate judge who isn't connected with the experiment at all, except he's judging the remote viewing versus multiple targets that could exist. So he doesn't know where the target is either. He gets a randomized selection inside a stack of targets. And he has to take the drawing that the remote viewer has made and the information that the remote viewer has written down, like any smells or any sounds or any images or what's, the shape of a building or something like that. And then he or she has to take that remote viewing drawing, and then match it to a number of things that are before him. So he doesn't know the target. He doesn't know the location. He doesn't had contact with the remote viewer or the target. He just takes a drawing and matches it to a bunch of stuff on a wall. And he says, okay, this looks the most like this. It's got this pattern that he drew. It's got this smell of this flower that's in the picture. It's got, whatever it is. And then at that point, you're graded. And if that independent judge has taken the remote viewer's information and matched it to the correct target, that's a first place finish, first place result. And Joe hit first place result after first place result after first place result. And they sent him to Meade at that point to start the remote viewing program. And now he didn't really believe it. He thought this whole thing was an operation on him. Like, how gullible is this guy? Like, can we string him along? How long is he going to be strung along for that we're telling him he's psychic? Although he kind of knew he was psychic because he'd get hints about operations in the jungle, and he was all throughout Vietnam, and he's gone to 110 countries. He's a legit field operative. So he's getting drops. He's going in and talking to tribal chiefs, making treaties and stuff like that. Like, he's a legit operator.
I don't talk much about money or the economy, but let's face it, ignoring it doesn't help either. Because I believe the government screws up all the time. I think they let down veterans, ship jobs overseas, they help their rich friends make even more money. It is insane. Do you really think they care about helping us out with our money? I don't think so. That's one of the reasons why a lot of folks are stepping away from the government-run systems and starting to diversify their money into real assets like gold and silver. If you're concerned about your finances and the future of your finances like I am, there's a damn good play you can make. Check out Goldco. Goldco will hook you up with a free 2023 Gold IRA kit. This kit will teach you how to help safeguard your savings with real gold and silver. At the very least, it makes sense to get educated about your options. So get your free kit at goldco.com/Ryan or call 855-936-GOLD. Plus, for qualified orders, they'll send you up to $10,000 in free silver as a bonus while supplies last. Quit waiting around for politicians to rescue your finances. Help take control and handle your business yourself. So go ahead and check out goldco.com/Ryan or call 855-936-GOLD to get your free kit today. Just remember, performance may vary, and always consult with a financial professional before making any investment decisions. You've heard the buzz about ketone supplements and how they can boost your workouts by helping your body use fatty acids for fuel. I take a shot of HVMN ketone supplement before my morning workout. It's focused energy. It's not an energy drink though. It's like a feeling of being in the zone. I don't feel hyper jittery, anxiety, stuff like I get when I drink too much coffee. They're great for cycling, long runs, and all kinds of workouts, and can help you stay sharper on a regular basis. We also just received some exciting news. In addition to being available in select Equinox gyms, Ketone IQ can now be found in local Sprout stores nationwide. I wish I'd had this product when I was on active duty. I get better endurance, I don't get the crash, and it helps curb my appetite. HVMN is offering my audience 30% off your first subscription order of Ketone IQ. You can save 30% off your first subscription order of Ketone IQ at hvmn.com/Shawn. Again, visit hvmn.com/Shawn and subscribe upon checkout for 30% off.
So he gets sent to Meade, and he doesn't quite believe that, he doesn't understand what this remote viewing is all about yet because he's brand new to the program. He's brand new to this experiment that they're trying to put together. So he tries to test himself on Skylab in 1978. I think it's coming down from, this is the first USS space station base. Like the International Space Station, there was a Skylab version of it back in the late 70s. Except it ran out of juice and they couldn't use it anymore, and it was going to come down out of orbit and fall down and break apart, but not quite burn up. And so they were really worried that major chunks of this, like refrigerator-sized stuff, was going to come down and land on somebody's head. Telemetry wasn't what it is today, so they had no idea where this thing was coming down or when it was coming down. They just knew it was coming down. It was in a decaying orbit, and eventually it was going to enter the atmosphere and could land literally anywhere on the planet. And they didn't know. And so he was like, all right, I'm going to test myself on this. He said, if I have an opportunity to fail, this is it. Because no one knows where this thing is coming down. And so I'll just go into my remote viewing process that I'm being taught how to do this, go into a meditation, see if I can figure this out. And he came up with a date, and he came up with a location. So this, as far as the scientists were concerned, they were like, okay, this is going to land somewhere, this is going to re-enter somewhere in this 6-month time frame is the best guess.
What year is this? Do you know?
It's like, I think it's like 78. Yeah, so it's back then before they had a bunch of awesome telemetry to know exactly where something was in space. Now they're tracking all kinds of things that are this big in our orbit.
So they have a 6-month window.
Yeah, basically.
Like it's going to land somewhere. Do they have a hemisphere?
No.
They just know it's going to hit the Earth in a 6-month time frame. Okay.
Yeah, because when it comes down will definitely determine where it lands on the planet, right? If it goes an extra 5 minutes in orbit, well, it could be whole another continent because of the speed that it's going, right? It's up in orbit at like 17,000 miles an hour or whatever. So he wrote down a date, and he walked up and put a pin on the map. And the pin on the map happened to be in Australia. And the date he missed by 6 days. So the date was close, but the pin that he put on the map, he missed the location of reentry by 30 miles, which statistically is 1 in 6,656,000. It's like hitting the lottery numbers on your first try to be able to identify where Skylab came down. If you were standing on the location where he put the pin on the map, you could look up and literally see Skylab breaking up in front of you.
Wow.
So Hal Puthoff said it was the best remote viewing of a future event that he'd ever seen, and I think still since. Being able to identify where this thing was going to come down out of orbit. And so at that point, Joe thought, okay, well, maybe I'll stick with this remote viewing thing for a while.
What was the event that sparked CIA's interest in all of this?
Well, I think they were just motivated to try to investigate whether this had any merit for intelligence gathering and for operational information.
Was it Russia?
Yeah.
Russia's capability with remote viewing is what sparked the United States Central Intelligence Agency to start looking into this.
Yeah.
How much money did they dump into this program?
We don't know exactly. Joe personally told me over a lunch, millions. So more than one, officially. I don't know how many millions, but it was very important for the United States to be able to investigate whether or not this had intelligence capabilities and what level of benefit that could be gleaned from investigating this type of because they started getting amazing viewings out of Joe right away. And it's like, okay, well, how many amazing LeBron James of consciousness are there to say, this person can sit in a room and tell me what's going on at a location and potential future events? Because some of the remote viewers that the CIA used were able to produce the effects of nuclear tests that had been secret until the remote viewer said this is going to happen, be able to figure out whether it was going to be a success or a failure, because some of them were failures, and all the intelligence turned out to be correct, and so they were super interested. Joe McMoneagle never missed the location of a nuclear sub in his entire career because he explains that there's a high level of entropy in a reactor for a sub, and that just glows like a big bright light in consciousness where those locations of those types of entropy events are. So if anyone ever needed to know, like they lost track of where a nuclear sub was for the Russians, they'd go into Joe's office and he goes, right here. And they'd check their sensors and boom, it would be there.
Well, since we're talking about nuclear subs and Joe McMoneagle, tell me the story.
Yeah. Well, the one that made everyone sit up and take notice and got him more funding for a large number of years was when there was a building that was identified by intelligence personnel that became the top priority for the National Security Council. It was the largest building under one roof in the world, and it was high in the Russian tundra near this large body of water, so they thought it might be a manufacturing facility for some type of military craft, and they weren't sure what it was, and everybody wanted to know what was going on inside the building because they had triple death wire fencing. In between all those, they had sentries with dogs, 24-hour site-to-site sentry circle around the property, trains coming in, dumping off raw materials 24/7, food coming in, food service for the people who were working inside the building, and no one knew what was going on inside the building. And so someone at the National Security Council meetings knew that they had a new psychic program down at Meade and sent the manila folder down to Fort Meade, and they handed it to Joe McMoneagle. The first thing they handed him was simply map coordinates. And they said, show us what you see here. And he came up with the building that they were concerned about. And he described the building, and they said, okay, you're on target. And then they gave him a picture of that building, and they said, tell us what's going on inside here. Now, the guys at the National Security Council and all the intelligence guys who were in the room came to the consensus that it was going to be some kind of troop carrier that they could probably transport over to the ocean because it was 4 or 5 blocks away from the ocean, but it was short enough to where they could transport something of medium size over to the ocean to get it into the water. But that was their best guess. Joe McMoneagle was the only person who came up with the result. He dropped into the building and he started viewing this thing, and he viewed it over a number of days and came up with a drawing and an explanation and technical specifications for a brand new submarine. And he said, this is the biggest submarine in the world by far. It's 1.5 times bigger than the next biggest sub. This is the brand new classification of Russian sub. And he came up with a number of very unique characteristics for that sub. And he said, it's not a cylinder. It's a cylinder that looks like it's cut in half, spread out, and then a flat part welded on the top and the bottom. And the U.S. engineers looked at that later after he sent it, and he said, that's impossible. It'd be crushed at depth. You know, it's highly unlikely, et cetera. But then he added the specifications. It's got a special drive propulsion system that I don't want to say too much about, but it's also got canted launch tubes, which means it can fire nuclear missiles on the run without having to stop, which could give us about 20 minutes warning that we're going to lose 1,200 cities. So this is a first strike weapon. And it's, by the way, if you've seen the movie Hunt for Red October, that submarine that they used in that movie was the sub that Joe McMoneagle outed. He said it's almost 2 football fields long, it's 75 feet wide, it's 7 stories tall. He drew, and he's got a video of this that he sent up to the National Security Council. He drew a diagram of the sub with its specifications, with its very interesting technical advancements that the United States didn't have on their subs. And he's got the original tape that he submitted to the NSC, and this has been declassified, so he can share it now. So this is the tape that he reported up to the NSC before the thing was launched, and proved him correct. But he sent all that up, and Robert Gates was the guy who is collecting all the information for the people disseminating the information for the National Security Council. Didn't even let it through.
Really?
Yeah, because he's like, this came from a psychic. And they're like, yeah. And he's like, he looked at it, and he's like, looked at the report, and he's like, okay, the sub, the engineers said the sub can't survive at depth. It's way too big. He's the only guy who thinks it's a sub. It's not. They're not going to be able to roll this off into the water. There's no water there, and it's too big to transport over to the ocean. So he wrote total fantasy on top of the report and sent it back to Joe at Meade. Joe is not pleased. He's a little bit of an attitude, and he's a really good operative who's now just been put into this remote viewing thing where he's had some success in. And he's like, I know this is a sub. And so he took that total fantasy remark and he wrote under it, He went back into a meditation, and he looked at the sub again. He looked how far along was it, and he made an estimation of how long it was going to take to launch this thing. And he goes, "Yeah, well, your total fantasy launch is in 112 days. Send it back to Robert Gates at Meade or at the Pentagon."
How did that go?
Well, Robert Gates has a little bit of an ego. The good news is someone at the National Reconnaissance Office picked up this pissing match, and they were curious. And so they tasked a satellite to do a flyover at 114 days from that date that he said 112 days. And they snapped pictures of the Red October submarine, 7 stories high, 75 feet wide, almost 2 football fields long, canted launch tubes, special propulsion, the whole thing. He nailed it all.
Are you serious?
Yeah. 2 cylinders separated with flat pieces in between, right next to a brand new canal that they built right next to the building in from the sea, so they could roll it off into the water. So they built a canal in the 4 months that he said they were going to launch it in, and just dumped it into the canal right next to the building. So that was interesting. And they were 2 days into, they had all their hatches wide open because they were loading reactor cores and missiles 2 days into the process of loading missiles. So he nailed it to the day, including all the specifications. And no one believed him. And it was one of the greatest information gathering operations for any launch of any Russian equipment since and to this day.
I would imagine that sparked a lot of interest in remote viewing in Robert Gates. In Robert Gates' mind. So what, and I'm sure a lot of other minds and organizations, so what happened after this?
So the fringe folks who were starting to investigate remote viewing and sending tasks down to Meade became most of the intelligence agencies in the United States government started overtasking the remote viewers down there. So they got crushed.
How many remote viewers were there?
There were a bunch. I mean, there were 4 or 5 that they had as a stable, and then they were trying out other individuals, bringing people in, letting people go, because they were like less effective. But it was a constant barrage of life or death situations. Tell us what you can see. These are special operations that are going live. Tell us which way we need to turn. What's going on? Somebody just got kidnapped. We got probably 18 hours before he's dead. Help figure out where he went. A lot of missing people and missing operators. To tell us where he is, we'll go get him. And that was taxing on a lot of those remote viewers, and they got burned out pretty quick. And so that's where Monroe Institute stepped in to help provide a training program that could give them a faster cool down and a deeper focus on being able to get good information in a quicker time, so that they didn't have to spend so much time prepping and meditation to be able to get in and get a good viewing on something.
How long are these guys spending in meditation?
Well, it depends on the viewer, but you could do like in the early days. I think Joe told me he was spending, 45 minutes to an hour to try to figure out a place where he could get to where he could get a good bit of information. But in his later years, after he was practiced, and this is why plasticity matters here, where your brain changes in form and function to help you do, like you play the piano, and then all of a sudden you get better at playing the piano because your brain just gets used to it, and he says, okay, I need to play the piano better. Shooting baskets, you get that muscle memory. Well, that's your brain changing to help you shoot those baskets better and just drain the 3. Doing crossword puzzles, your brain will change in form and function to help you do the crossword puzzles faster. Well, it turns out remote viewing is the same way. Later in his life, when he was doing remote viewing, like for one example, he got a call one night when he was in Las Vegas from the local sheriff who was looking for a missing child. And the mom thought the child was with dad, and the dad thought the child was with mom, and it's getting dark when they figured out the child is missing. And it's in Virginia wilderness and in the county in which Joe lived. And there's wild animals, and it's getting cold at night, and the kids may not make it. He got a call in the middle of the night by the sheriff who's like, let's get the psychic on the phone. And Joe immediately picked up the phone, closed his eyes for like 5 seconds, and then basically told the sheriff, he goes, send your deputy out this road to this particular location. Have him stop the car, get out of the car, get his compass out. And at 318 degrees on his compass, I want you to walk 1,209 steps. Stop, call the child's name out, and he will respond. And that was like within 5-10 seconds of getting the call and asking, what the details were. And then he gave a reading. And so he goes back to bed thinking, okay, hopefully they're going to find the kid. If they follow his directions, they will. About 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, you get another call in his hotel room, and he's pissed because it's ringing the phone in the middle of the night again. So he gets up, grabs the phone. Hello? Joe, we sent our officer out there to the spot where you said, and he pulled out his compass, but this officer just said he got back from training last week regarding missing children, and he said the statistics are that kids 10 and under will not walk up a hill when they're lost. But he's looking at his compass reading, and it goes directly up a steep hill. What do you want us to do? And his answer was immediate. It's like, do what I told you to do. Click. And so then another 5-10 minutes goes by, and he gets another call, and he picks up the phone a little softer this time because I think he had a feeling that they found him. He's like, did you find him? And she goes, yes, Joe, thank you very much. Good night. And so the officer, against his training, went up the hill, 1,209 steps, followed the directions, stopped where he was, called out the child's name, and the kid answered him because he had walked up the hill to get to a cabin, and he was sleeping on the back porch sofa of a cabin that was deserted at the time, but it had a light on. And he was a 5-year-old kid, and he said, my daddy said if I ever got lost, walk to the closest light and stay there. And so he went up the hill and was sleeping on the back porch of that cabin. And Joe sent that state trooper up the hill, called out his name, and the kid woke up and answered him.
Wow.
And it took literally 5 seconds for him to get the original viewing and that all that stuff's like documented, right? I mean, these aren't, bullshit, made up stories. Like, he's got legitimate government records, and he was awarded the Legion of Merit after retiring for all of the stuff and all of the aid that all the operational intelligence that he provided that saved people's lives. So it's possible to reach out beyond your regular physiology and see things that aren't local to you because consciousness is out beyond our body. And you just have to be able to project yours to see other places and other things. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. The more you practice it, the better you can do it. And the more reliable it is.
As much as I want to keep talking about Joe McMoneagle,
yeah,
it's going to be where we have a collaborative effort here
Yes.
to get him in the studio to tell his story. And I am very much hoping and praying that happens.
I just saw him because I just got back from Monroe Institute, and I think he wants to come on. We're going to try to figure out how to get that done. He doesn't travel so well, so maybe we might figure something out. But he knows who you are and likes you and likes the show, and so that kind of helped. But he's a guy that when he calls the Pentagon picks up the phone and says, "Yes, Joe." So he's one of those untouchable guys. He's an amazing get. I'd love to have him come here and hang out and talk with you because his stories are amazing. And he is the real deal. He's a national treasure of what he's done for the United States and United States intelligence with his abilities.
Well, we're going to do everything we can. So, and I really hope that happens. But you are now an official ambassador of the Monroe Institute. You've done some of this testing. You're getting into not Monroe Institute. You're getting into remote viewing.
Yeah.
And so, how did you get involved with the Monroe Institute?
It was in my research to try to figure out what consciousness was and how it worked that I ran into a documentary that included Joe in it called Third Eye Spies. And it was about how Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff put together the remote viewing programs for the government back in the day. And it was the story about the origin and what they did to try to create a remote viewing training program and testing and, put a scientific method behind the whole thing. And then in the latter part of that documentary, they interviewed Joe and had him on there and told a couple of stories about his accolades. And it was through that I found out he was still alive, that he was still teaching remote viewing. And I was like, that's amazing. I want to go meet this guy and see what this is all about, because if I'm writing a book about consciousness and I believe that it goes on beyond the body, I want to go meet a guy who's actually proven it. And so I got signed up for his course and went up to Monroe, took his remote viewing course, and that was amazing, by the way, because not only did he go through the double-blind protocol and how to clear your mind and what you're looking for and how to just take whatever your mind is giving you and put it on the paper and don't judge it and don't name it. Just take the raw information, the raw data, and put it down, and then let somebody else judge if you've hit the target or not. Through that process, people who are brand new to remote viewing in the class were blowing their own minds on how well they could see things they had no idea about. Because you got to understand, when you go up there to do a remote viewing course, all they give you is a reference number. They give you a blank sheet of paper and they say, B43, go. That's it.
What is B43?
It's
what does
the
that
fucking
mean?
number on the envelope of the image that you're supposed to look into the envelope and see what's in there.
So when day one, week one,
Yeah.
at the Monroe Institute for Remote Viewing, you get an envelope with a photograph.
You don't even get the envelope. You can't touch it. They
Can't touch it.
They say they've got a stack of envelopes up front, and then they say, okay, not everybody gets the same one. They say your name, and then they give you a reference number out of their stack of envelopes is up at the front. And so you get a letter and a number, or just sometimes a number, or just sometimes a couple of letters, or whatever it is, and that's it. That's all you get. And then you start to close your eyes and you start to envision what are you getting from a hearing sensation, a taste sensation. What is it that your mind is giving you at that moment, and you try to record it on the piece of paper, and that's it. That's all they give you is just a reference number.
Without any of these technologies, this is bare bones.
Yeah.
No frequency work, nothing.
Yeah, because they start with just a blind read, and then they start to implement the technology of the signals in the headphones and stuff like that, so you can see the difference, see how it improves your ability to view and your results, etc. But from go, they just give you a number and they say start drawing.
So walk me through this process.
So
You get your reference number.
Yep, you get your reference number, and then you're supposed to quiet your mind and see if you can clear whatever's going on in your mind for a moment, the thoughts. And then you look for, show me the target that's associated with B43 or whatever your reference number was. And then your mind starts to do whatever it does. And whatever it gives you, you try to record that and you try to remain on your target. Like, you don't think about lunch tomorrow. You don't think about conversation you had with somebody earlier in the day. You don't think about, whatever it is that your mind wants to go to. You're focusing on the target. You want the information about the target. If your mind starts to wander, you just say, target. And whatever your mind gives you, that's the remote viewing. And sometimes you'll hit it, sometimes you won't, but you draw whatever it is that your mind gives you.
So what was your mind giving you?
My first remote viewing ever, which convinced me that it was real. I was in my check unit doing my drawing, and this is a little place of a little cubby hole that you go and sit so you can be by yourself and focus on your own thoughts so that no sounds distract you, et cetera. No light comes in if you don't want it. I flashed in front of my mind flashed in front of my vision with my eyes closed, the idea of a round spider web. Is the best thing that I could, and your brain will equate some things to be as close as, like, whatever it shows you, it'll be close to, but maybe not exactly what it was. So I just saw like a spider web, and I saw multiple lines going out from the center, and I saw multiple lines connecting the lines that were going out, so it kind of looked like a spider web. But then in the middle, there was a big blotch of opaque material, whatever it was, I don't know. So basically I drew like a spider web with a big old dot in the middle of it, scribble, scribble, scribble. And that's all that I got. So we go back down after doing our drawings to the room where they handed us our target. And the first target, everybody does the same because they have it on a slide that they're going to show. So you come in there and they say, okay, you're going to be remote viewing, and they gave you a reference number, but everybody gets the same reference number. You go off and you draw whatever it was. And then they show you, everyone in the next slide, what it is. And the next slide that they showed was, and they have a standard database that they pull from. These are images that are used for testing remote viewing, and they're all randomly selected usually. So no one can cheat. No one knows what's going to come up, that type of thing. But this one is the first one they gave us, so they had it on the slide. And the next thing that they showed us was a white background with black pen illustration of an old Ferris wheel from the 1920s that had a number of lines going out from the center. And where the lines got too thick for the pen, the lines converged, there was a huge black dot where the pen lines all just kind of merged together into a bunch of ink. And I looked down at this spider web with this black dot in the middle of it. And it wasn't exactly, because I drew a spider web because that's what was presented to me in my mind. But it was a goddamn circle with a bunch of connecting lines and a big dot in the middle of it, just like the frame was.
What was what's going through your head at this point?
Holy shit. I'm freaking out. I'm going to remote viewing at Monroe, and I'm like, first of all, I don't expect to be able to do anything at all.
Yeah.
Because I've never done it before. I don't know what happens here. I don't know anything about remote viewing. I'm just up here basically to meet this amazing guy. And so I'm not expecting anything. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. I don't even know if it's real. Because, who knows? Could this whole Joe McMoneagle thing be a complete disinformation campaign to try to lead foreign intelligence down the wrong road and have them waste time on psychics and all this other stuff going through my mind? And then I drew 80 to 90% of the first image, first try out of the gate. And I thought that was interesting. And then maybe that was just a lucky guess. And what happened after that, all throughout the week, is that I kept getting first place results. Viewing after viewing after viewing. And again, this is the same process that they use where you get a randomized reference number that's unique to you. You go and you draw whatever you get. And then you're handing it to another person who's a judge who has to then take 4 images, random images, and say, okay, your drawing best matches this thing. And I kept putting out drawings that would match the right one. Because only one of the distractors on the paper would be the actual target. And they would have to say, this matches, because they didn't know which one it was, this matches this image. And that was the target. Time after time. And I was just like, that's crazy. And this is real.
What are these? One, how long did it take you to come up with the spider web?
Almost immediately. It was the first thing that flashed in when I closed my eyes, that spider web kind of like out of the darkness flashed in a white light in front of my face. It was like,
and that's it?
That was it.
That was big, and then you drew it, and that's it.
Yeah,
that's
well, it kept flashing. Like I kept because I was doubting it. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, bullshit. This isn't it. It's not a spider web.
You're like, all right, fuck it, I'm just going to draw this spider web.
Yeah, basically.
Like total disbelief.
It wouldn't go away. It kept flashing in front of my face. I tried to draw up other stuff, which is a whole nother process that you're not supposed to do, which I didn't know, but he taught us later. He's like, don't do that. Don't do this. Don't put any meaning to it. Don't put an analytical overlay that you think this is an apple or whatever. Just take the basic information that you're given, because the shape, although it might look like an apple to you, might be something else. So don't draw an apple if it kind of looks like an apple, but it's two separated C's that are opposite that kind of looks like an apple to you. Don't draw an apple. Just draw what you see, the two opposite C's, because it might be something else. So I tried to push it out and it wouldn't go away, and I was like, all right, well, this is wrong. Whatever. Doesn't really matter. I didn't come up here to succeed. I came up here to meet this guy. And then it turned out to be right. And I was blown away.
I mean, you obviously impressed the Monroe Institute.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did good at remote viewing, but a lot of people do good at remote viewing. I mean, you might be surprised. Joe will tell you right off the bat, everyone has this capability. It's whether or not you use it. And the thing that people call the sixth sense, he says, is the first sense. Like, that's the way we grew out of the bush and developed and evolved. That sixth sense was the first sense that could keep you out of danger and keep you surviving in the wild. Like when you knew that there was a big cat in that bush or whatever it was going to kill you, and you stayed away from it and you survived. He says that's the first sense. That's how he survived 14 years in a 20-month life expectancy position in intelligence, is that he just followed his hunches. He followed his gut. He told us a story the other day. It was amazing. He went out at the end of his career. He was sent out to do a drop with a Russian agent, and he was sent along with a guy who was an administrator inside intelligence but had never done any field work. And they got to Greece where they were going, and the guy had made a reservation down at the beach of a really nice resort, and he goes, "We can't go there. That place is going to be bombed." And they went on, and the guy screwed up the operation, and Joe wound up getting the drop because he identified the guy and got the drop. And then they came and were about to get ready to leave for the airport to go fly back, and a bomb went off in that hotel where they had their reservations. Right? So that kind of stuff we're wired into as human beings.
Yeah.
Because it's part of consciousness. It's what helps bring consciousness into our body, is a larger field of conscious energy that you can reach out into and sense other things that are outside your body and outside space and time, like into the future, which is how he was able to predict the coming down of the Skylab.
I mean, the bomb story, I can relate to in my 14 years of operations within, the different SEAL teams, the agency, all that. I mean, there is a feeling, that you do get when things are about to happen. And so I can understand that.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
But
well, he says everybody's tagged into this. Like, everybody's connected into it. It's whether or not you use it and whether or not you exercise it that where you can actually get better at it or not. And so, you go through this week and you get a little more confidence and you get a little bit more trusting in the process. And all of a sudden, most of the class is nailing their assignments in remote viewing.
no kidding.
I mean, it's amazing.
That was a question of mine. I wanted to know how many people were in your group, roughly.
Yeah, roughly about 20. And I'd say about 14 or 15 of them were nailing first place results most of the time.
Are you serious?
Yeah. There was a bunch of seconds and a bunch of thirds where people, and even Joe misses sometimes. Other world-class remote viewers, sometimes you're on target, sometimes you're off. I mean, you're not nailing it all the time. And that was prevalent in the class. Like, I had a couple of things that I missed on that were different exercises. But even when I was asked to drop into the body of they have a remote viewing that's a medical nature, where you're supposed to guess the medical condition of a reference number again. They just give you a number. And they said, drop into this person's body and what's going on. And I was like, I had a feeling. I was just like, there's pain here. There's pain here. To me, that's kind of a right knee replacement, like where they cut the leg and put a knee in. And there's all kinds of pain here, and it's like glowing and whatnot. I was like, I don't know, right knee replacement. Nailed it. How the hell did I do that? I don't know. I mean, you're reaching out into consciousness and touching on a reference number from an individual, 20 years ago. 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 an individual who's a real individual. They've agreed to be a target that somebody can, guess what I have, guess my ailment. And it's not the only thing I came up with, because I was like, well, she's had her appendix out. She's on medication for high cholesterol, which is messing with her liver. She needs to get her liver checked. I came up with a whole laundry list of stuff because I didn't even know what they're talking about. But I was like, there's a right knee replacement. And they looked and they were like, that's right.
Were you right about all of it?
No, I don't know about all of it. But the target was, their result that they were looking for was right knee replacement.
So what did that visualization look like?
It was more of a feeling.
It was an intuition.
Yeah, it was like I said, okay, target, and I just started feeling around my own body of what was going on. And I'm in good health. I don't have any health problems at all. So, but that's what I felt. I was like,
you felt your knee?
Yeah, I felt the knee. I felt the pain here and here, like above and below the knee. And I was like, well, that means they're probably replacing the knee. It's not just the hurt knee. They're probably going through an operation to replace the knee. But then I also felt stuff in my liver. I felt like my cholesterol was high when I don't have high cholesterol personally. I felt like my appendix is gone, right side, and my appendix is still in me. So I don't even have a scar or whatever. But I don't know if it was all correct, but I got the one thing that was correct that they were looking for.
Earlier you had mentioned they put you in a room where it's shielded from, did you say radio signal or radio waves?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Just to have control over the potential for signals to come in and out of the room to give you information. Like, they want to remove all potential for any, interference or
external frequency. Would that manipulate the meditation?
I don't know the science behind whether or what frequencies might interfere with a viewing, but I know that they want to make sure that there's no signals coming in to where you'd have a gadget or something that could communicate information to you about a target. Like, they want to have strict scientific controls to make sure that the data they're getting, because they're still studying this stuff right now. They're still studying the science of remote viewing and the ability to look out through consciousness. And they want to just make sure that there are no outside interferences, that they maintain a complete separation between the remote viewer and the target. For instance, if they're practicing, target identification. And some of that stuff is amazing, where the remote viewer will say, okay, this person's standing in this certain office of this certain building. Here's the complex. Here are the other buildings around it, yada, yada, yada. And they nail the whole thing. They want to make sure that there's no way to get any information in through radio signals or collusion of people trying to scam the system or whatever. They want to make sure that they have those controls all the time so they can rely on the data that they're getting. It's amazing stuff.
It is. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's get into some of the technology when they started implementing that. Next on The Shawn Ryan Show. Most of what we're talking about is actually in the present. What is this diagnosis that's happening there? What is the pain this woman's feeling in her knee? But also, remote viewing is also looking into the future.
Yeah. It started with a study that was done on what's called priming. The primer flashed after your decision, altered the timing in which you could select the word choice in the same way that it did when you put it before.
I'm always looking for the scientific explanation on why that happens, why I'm able to tap into, I guess I would call it a higher consciousness.
Theta is a state where a lot of creativity occurs in theta. It's great for ideas, word pictures, and things like that. The crossover state between this type of consciousness and the consciousness of delta sleep.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.